What are you doing here? The professor's sharp voice echoed through the packed amphitheater of the most prestigious university in the country. Every gaze turned to Marcus, the only black face among 200 advanced mathematics students. The silence was deafening. But what happened over the next 30 minutes forever changed the history of that institution. This is a story about invisibility, hidden genius, and the moment when truth explodes in the face of those who judge by appearance. And you need to hear it to the end, because what Marcus had been keeping silent was far more powerful than any diploma hanging on the wall. Marcus Silva was 23 years old when he first set foot on the campus of Stanford University's Department of Applied Mathematics. It wasn't just any campus, it was the temple of the country's intellectual elite, where the children of magnates and globally recognized prodigies came to polish their privileged minds. He arrived on a full scholarship earned through a social inclusion program. But in the marble-lined hallways and among the statues of European mathematicians, Marcus seemed out of place, literally. While his classmates arrived in imported cars, Marcus stepped off the city bus at 6:30 in the morning. While they discussed vacations in Paris, Marcus was counting coins for lunch at the university cafeteria. The difference wasn't just in money, it was in the way the world saw them. "Are you sure you're in the right classroom?" asked Amanda Richardson, daughter of a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, on the first day of class. She wasn't cruel by nature, just too sheltered to realize that her words cut. Marcus simply nodded and sat in the last row, always in the last row. It was safer to be invisible than to be the center of attention for the wrong reason. Professor Dr. Harrison Blackwell ruled that classroom like an emperor in his private coliseum. 62 years old, author of dozens of books, consultant to European and American universities. His reputation was built on decades of producing only the best. And the best, in his eyes, had a very specific profile. "This semester," Dr. Blackwell declared on the first day, "you'll face problems that 99% of the world's population could never solve. If you can't keep up, well, there are always more suitable options for your level." His eyes briefly passed over Marcus when he said, "more suitable for your level." It wasn't accidental, but Marcus didn't just understand mathematics. He understood silence. He had learned since childhood that his genius had to be shown, not proclaimed. In the neighborhood where he grew up, being too smart could be dangerous. At an elite university, being black and smart was complicated. During the first few weeks, Marcus watched. He saw how his classmates asked elaborate questions just to impress. He saw how the professor smiled at certain answers and frowned at others. He saw how Amanda and 5 other students formed an inner circle of approval, while he remained at the academic periphery. And Marcus saw something else: the mistakes, small conceptual errors that went unnoticed because they came from the right mouths, elegant but incomplete solutions that were praised because their authors had the right last name. The truth is, Marcus hadn't gotten there by chance. At 16, he had solved a fractal geometry problem that had puzzled mathematicians for decades. At 18, he created an algorithm that revolutionized probability calculations. By 20, he had already mastered areas of mathematics that some professors only knew superficially. But none of that was written on his face. None of it was revealed in his simple clothes or in his quiet way of taking notes during every lecture. Marcus was a genius disguised as invisible, navigating a world that judged him before even hearing his voice. And Dr. Blackwell was about to make the biggest mistake of his academic career. The weeks passed in a silent dance of subtle humiliations. Marcus had grown used to the puzzled looks when he solved complex problems in group exercises. He had grown used to the overly surprised tone in comments. "Wow, Marcus, you actually understand this pretty well." As if his understanding were an anomaly that needed constant reaffirmation. Dr. Blackwell had a peculiar routine. Every Tuesday, he would choose a student to solve a problem on the board in front of the whole class. It was his pedagogical glory moment, as he called it, an opportunity for the true talents to shine. Marcus was never chosen until the class on transcendental number theory, a field so complex that even PhD students sweat just to grasp the basic concepts. Dr. Blackwell had prepared a particularly challenging problem, one of those problems that separate the genuinely brilliant from the hardworking mediocre. "Today," he announced with his trademark smile, "we'll see who really belongs in this room." Amanda was called first. Her parents had paid for the best private tutors since she was 8. She approached the board confidently, but after 15 minutes of attempts, her equations had turned into a mess of meaningless symbols. "Next," said Dr. Blackwell without showing disappointment. Amanda was shielded by the armor of the right last name. James Parker, son of a tech magnate, also failed. After him, 3 other students tried and failed. The problem seemed untouchable, a mathematical Everest that challenged even the best. That's when Dr. Blackwell did something no one expected. His eyes landed on Marcus in the last row, quietly scribbling in his worn-out notebook. "Marcus," he said, and the name sounded like a challenge. "Why don't you come up here? Perhaps you have a different perspective on this problem." The room went dead silent. Amanda sighed softly. James rolled his eyes. It was obvious what was happening. Dr. Blackwell wanted to make Marcus an example. He wanted to show, in front of everyone, that there was a limit to how far social inclusion could take someone. Marcus slowly closed his notebook. He knew exactly what was happening. He had lived through moments like this his whole life. Moments where his intelligence was tested not to be celebrated, but to be disproved. Moments where his failure would be used to validate someone else's prejudice. But this time, something was different. Marcus was no longer the 15-year-old boy trying to prove himself in high school. He was no longer the insecure teenager who stayed silent to avoid conflict. At 23, carrying the weight of a life spent invisible, Marcus had reached his limit. He stood up slowly and walked to the front of the room. Each step echoed in the absolute silence. Dr. Blackwell crossed his arms, waiting for the moment when he could say, "See? I told you this level wasn't for everyone." Marcus took the marker and looked at the board. The problem was there. Daunting and seemingly impossible. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on him. And then, something extraordinary happened. Marcus didn't just start solving the problem, he rewrote it entirely. Instead of following the traditional path everyone had attempted, he approached the question from a completely new angle. His equations flowed on the board like mathematical poetry, each symbol connected to the next with a crystalline logic that mesmerized. In 10 minutes, he had not only solved the original problem, but expanded the solution to cover 3 more complex variants that weren't even part of the original question. The silence in the room had changed its nature. It was no longer the silence of expected humiliation. It was the silence of shock, of disbelief, of a world turned upside down. Dr. Blackwell stared at the board as if he were seeing a ghost. His hands trembled slightly. And Marcus, still facing the board, simply said, "Professor, would you like me to explain the proof to the class, or can I return to my seat?" Dr. Blackwell remained silent for a long 30 seconds. His eyes scanned every line of Marcus's solution, searching for a mistake, a flaw, anything that might restore the natural order of his academic world. He found nothing. This is impossible," he muttered, more to himself than to the class. "Where did you learn this approach?" Marcus turned slowly. His face showed no triumph or arrogance. There was something deeper there, a calm that comes from carrying heavy truths for too long. "I taught myself, Professor, on sleepless nights after working 16-hour shifts to pay for school." The response landed like a silent bomb. Amanda lowered her gaze, feeling for the first time the discomfort of her own ignorance. James Parker, who had mocked Marcus's simple clothes weeks earlier, now looked at him with a mix of disbelief, fear. Dr. Blackwell tried to regain control of an interesting solution, but we still to verify if it's math correct. "It is." The voice came from the back of the room. Dr. Helen Morrison, tenured professor from the Department of Pure Mathematics, had entered quietly during Marcus's demonstration. She carried a stack of papers and an expression Dr. Blackwell knew well. It was the same one she wore when she was about to revolutionize an established concept. "Helen," Dr. Blackwell tried to keep his composure, "how good that you're here. We were just witnessing one of the most elegant solutions I've seen in 15 years of academia," she interrupted. "Marcus, is it? May I take a closer look at your calculations?" Marcus nodded and stepped away from the board. Dr. Morrison approached, her eyes shining with the kind of excitement only true mathematicians understand. She analyzed every line, every logical transition, every conceptual leap. "Extraordinary," she murmured. "You didn't just solve the problem, you created a new method of approaching it. This technique could revolutionize an entire field within number theory." Dr. Blackwell's discomfort was palpable. 30 years of academic authority were being questioned by a solution crafted by someone he had spent weeks trying to diminish. "Helen, perhaps it's best we verify this more calmly, in private." "Harrison," her voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "How many years have you been in academia? You know I've been here over 30, and in all those years, how many times have you seen a mind capable of rethinking fundamental problems this way?" Silence. "I can answer for you. Never. And do you know why? Because you spend so much time looking for brilliance where you expect to find it. You've become blind to it when it appears where it shouldn't." The tension in the room was suffocating. The students were witnessing an academic battle in real time, but more than that, they were witnessing the moment uncomfortable truths came to light. Dr. Morrison turned to Marcus. "Do you have more work like this? Other solutions you've developed on your own?" Marcus hesitated. For years, he had kept his mathematical discoveries like dangerous secrets. In the world where he grew up, being too smart attracted the wrong kind of attention. At university, he had learned that his intelligence was constantly questioned, as if it were an anomaly that needed to be explained. "I have a few notebooks at home," he said finally. "A few notebooks," Dr. Morrison repeated, a smile forming on her face. "Marcus, I would very much like to see those few notebooks. Could you bring them tomorrow?" That was when the first major turning point happened. Dr. Blackwell, feeling his authority slipping away, decided to take a drastic step. "Helen," With all due respect, I must remind you that this student is here through a social assistance program. Perhaps it's best not to create unrealistic expectations. The silence that followed was different from all others. It was the silence of a red line being crossed, of something irrevocable being said. Marcus turned slowly to Dr. Blackwell. When he spoke, his voice was low, but every word echoed in the room like a distant thunderclap. Professor, you're right about one thing. I am here through social assistance. My mother cleans offices at night to help pay our electricity bill. My father, well, I don't even know who my father is. I grew up in a neighborhood where having books at home was considered a luxury. He paused, his eyes scanning every face in the room. But you're wrong about something else. Very wrong. And tomorrow, when I bring my notebooks, you'll find out just how wrong you are. The second turning point came in the form of a simple question from Dr. Morrison. Marcus, by any chance, have you ever heard of the generalized Goldbach conjecture? Marcus nodded. I'm familiar with it. In fact, I think I found a partial solution about 6 months ago. Dr. Morrison let the papers fall to the floor. The generalized Goldbach conjecture was considered one of the most complex mathematical challenges of the century. Entire universities dedicated full departments to its resolution. It was the kind of problem that defined academic careers. And Marcus was saying he had found a solution, alone, at home, while the world treated him as invisible. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the university carrying an old backpack and 3 notebooks covered with brown paper. They weren't expensive notebooks. They were the kind his mother could afford at the end of the school year when the stationery stores held clearance sales. But inside those notebooks was a universe. Dr. Morrison had arrived early and prepared a conference room. Dr. Blackwell was there, clearly displeased, along with 5 other professors from the department. News that a social assistance student claimed to have solutions to fundamental mathematical problems had spread quickly through the academic halls. Marcus placed the notebooks on the table and waited. Marcus, Dr. Morrison began gently, before we open your notebooks, I'd like you to tell us a little about how you developed this work. Marcus took a deep breath. It was the first time in his life someone truly wanted to hear his story, not to judge it, but to understand it. I started when I was 12, he said. My mother worked cleaning a university library at night. Sometimes she'd take me with her when she had no one to leave me with. While she cleaned, I'd read the books. Dr. Blackwell muttered something about unauthorized access to the library, but Dr. Morrison silenced him with a look. Go on, she encouraged. I discovered that math was silent. It didn't need expensive equipment, didn't make noise to bother the neighbors, and no one could take it from me. It was my secret world. Marcus opened the first notebook. The pages were filled with handwritten equations, diagrams made with a borrowed ruler, proofs that stretched across entire pages in a small, careful script. Dr. Morrison began to flip through, and her expression changed page after page. It wasn't just an impression, it was professional shock. This here, she pointed to a section on algebraic topology, this is a completely new approach to moduli spaces. Where did you find this reference? I didn't, Marcus replied simply. I needed to solve a bigger problem and created this approach because the ones I knew didn't work. One of the guest professors, Dr. Chen, a specialist in number theory, picked up the second notebook. After a few minutes flipping through it, he looked at Marcus as if he were seeing an alien. Do you have any idea what you wrote here? This proof on twin primes? It closes a gap mathematicians have been trying to fill for decades. Marcus shrugged. It was the only way I could make the numbers work. Then Dr. Morrison reached the section on the generalized Goldbach conjecture. She read it once, read it again, took out a calculator and began checking the calculations. After 20 minutes of absolute silence, she looked up. Marcus, her voice was trembling, are you sure you developed this on your own? The question had a clear subtext. In academic circles, revolutionary discoveries made by outsiders were always received with skepticism, especially when those outsiders lacked the expected academic pedigree. Marcus understood exactly what was being questioned. He had faced that doubt his whole life. The constant suggestion that his achievements weren't truly his own, that there had to be some alternative explanation for his intelligence. Professor, he said calmly, would you like me to redo the proof here, on the board, in front of everyone? Dr. Blackwell, who had remained in growing silence, finally exploded. This is ridiculous. It's not possible that a student without proper academic guidance, without access to the field's main publications, has developed work of this level. The silence that followed was charged with a different kind of tension. It was no longer about mathematics. It was about something much deeper and more painful. Marcus stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years of invisibility, of talents questioned, of intelligence treated as an anomaly. Professor Blackwell, you're right. It's not possible. It's not possible because, in your mind, people like me can't really be intelligent. It's not possible because, to you, genius can only come from places you recognize and approve of. He walked up to the board and picked up a marker. But you know what else isn't possible? It's not possible to fake mathematics. You either know it or you don't. There's no in between. And then, over the next 40 minutes, Marcus redid the entire proof of the generalized Goldbach conjecture on the board. Not only did he redo it, he expanded it, created variations, answered complex technical questions from the professors present. When he finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Dr. Chen was furiously taking notes. Dr. Morrison had tears in her eyes, not from sentimental emotion, but the kind of reverence mathematicians feel when witnessing something truly revolutionary. And Dr. Blackwell was sitting in his chair, staring at his own hands, confronting for the first time in his life the possibility that his prejudice had blinded him to one of the brightest minds he had ever encountered. Marcus, Dr. Morrison finally said, you need to publish this work. You need to present it at international conferences. You need to be recognized for what he's always been, Dr. Chen finished. A mathematical genius. The word genius echoed in the room, but Marcus didn't smile. There was no triumph on his face, only the deep fatigue of someone who had carried his light alone for far too long. Professors, he said calmly, I don't need you to call me a genius. I just needed you to see me. 6 months later, Marcus Silva stood on the main stage of the International Conference on Applied Mathematics, presenting his solution to the generalized Goldbach conjecture before an audience of over 1,000 mathematicians from around the world. In the front row, Dr. Morrison watched him with the pride of a mentor who had discovered a diamond in the rough. In the third row, Amanda Richardson, who had become one of Marcus's closest friends, cheered enthusiastically. Dr. Blackwell was not present. 3 months after that transformative day in the conference room, he had requested a transfer to a smaller university, citing philosophical differences with the department. Marcus's presentation was a resounding success. His discoveries didn't just solve complex theoretical problems. They had revolutionary practical applications in cryptography, artificial intelligence, and quantum physics. Universities from 3 continents offered him tenured positions. Tech companies offered 7-figure salaries. Publishers competed for the rights to his work. But Marcus had other plans. After the conference, he returned to his university and created the Marcus Silva Mathematical Mentorship Program, an initiative aimed at identifying and nurturing mathematical talent in overlooked communities, public school students, children of immigrants, youth from underserved neighborhoods, all those who, like him, carried invisible genius. His first mentee was Aisha, a 14-year-old girl, daughter of refugees, who solved differential equations while helping her parents in a convenience store. The second was Roberto, a 16-year-old boy who had developed complex algorithms on a broken computer he had repaired himself. Marcus discovered that the world was full of invisible geniuses, people whose intelligence was ignored because it didn't come packaged in the forms society expected. 3 years later, 5 of his mentees had won international math Olympiads. 10 had received full scholarships to the country's top universities, and 20 had discovered that their brilliant minds were not anomalies to be hidden, but gifts to be celebrated. Dr. Morrison, now chair of the math department, often said that Marcus had done more for true academic excellence in 3 years than many professors achieved in entire careers. And Marcus had finally found his voice. Not the voice that shouted to be heard, but the voice that whispered powerful truths to those willing to listen. In his lectures around the world, he always ended with the same reflection. Genius doesn't check zip codes. It doesn't look at bank accounts. It doesn't ask for your parents' degrees. It shows up wherever it wants, whenever it wants, in whomever it wants. Our only responsibility is to be ready to recognize it, especially when it comes disguised as invisible. In the back row of his talks, there was always someone like he once was, young, quiet, carrying worn-out notebooks and enormous dreams. And Marcus always made a point to look at that person and nod discreetly. It was his way of saying, I see you. You're not alone. Your time will come. Because Marcus had learned that the greatest injustice wasn't being treated badly. It was being treated as if you didn't exist. And the greatest justice was ensuring that no brilliant mind remained invisible for lack of someone who knew how to see. Marcus Silva was no longer the invisible boy in the back row. He had become the light that helped others emerge from the shadows. And that, perhaps, was the most beautiful equation he had ever solved.